right, okay, so let's get into it. So first of all, hello, thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege to be here. I've almost made it to this conference once before, as Ben mentions, but I'm really quite delighted to be here at SOC FETISH Conf 2018. It's been an emotional day. I feel like I've let the side down, but that's by the by. Let's see. So my name is Phil Hawksworth, as Ben says, and we're not really doing Q&A, but I'm very happy to take questions on. Oh, I've got a really long delay on my slides. There we go. So my Twitter handle is just my name. So at least I can remember it. Phil Hawksworth. If you have any questions, comments, you disagree with anything, or you want to chat, and also come and grab me later on as well. I've been making things on the web for kind of almost 20 years now, and the last 9 or so years have been at agencies, and the latter of those, maybe I'll abandon my clicker and just kind of, there we go. The last of those was an agency called RGA. Actually, my slides are really struggling a little bit, but that's fine. So I was at an agency called RGA for about 6 years, and then in December of last year, I moved over to work at a company called Netlify. While I was at RGA, I did a bunch of talks, and I was always banging on about Netlify, and then at the end of the last year, I decided to go and work for them. So that puts me in a slightly difficult position here now, because there's a worry that maybe this is going to sound like a sales pitch. I'll try desperately not to let that happen. And in the spirit of that, maybe it's worth me just kind of putting in context Netlify with other companies that I might substitute into that, into a sentence describing them. So I should put that up there, the slide with our competitors, to make sure everything's even and equal-handed. Seems reasonable. No, let's do a slightly better job. So people sometimes talk about Netlify in the same kind of sentences as people like Surge or Zeit, who do different kinds of hosting infrastructure and automation, and also companies, although we're not really competitors, but sometimes we fit in the same space as people like Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, in that they're hosting infrastructure. I'll get into that in a little bit, but before I do anything else, I have to say, I've had a lovely day, but I'm a little bit pissed off because, as we've gone through the day, we've had some wonderful talks, but the way we finished things off is that, we've had Nadi, and then got me, and hello, and then we've got drinks and socializing. So it really feels that I'm very literally kind of between a rock and a hard place. So we'll battle through as best we can. This is about 40 minutes, a little bit less now, about 40 minutes to talk about that. And to contextualize 40 minutes for you a little bit, that's in 40 minutes, light can travel 719 million kilometers. And as we've all learned one thing from Harry's talk, that's just under 2,000 laps around Saturn. So you can take that home with you, that's for you. I love that you're cheering maths. That's good. So in terms of my track record, so this is why I'm kind of anxious about this, because Nadi's talk is just so beautiful, and also we're fresh in our minds is the kind of the energy and inspiration from Una and all of the other talks as well. My track record, as I say, I've been working in an agency, and I've been bitching about content management systems and then kind of getting excited about static websites. Ooh, exciting. It doesn't seem very glamorous, any of that. So for this talk, what I really want to do is I want to jazz it up a little bit. So that's why I've gone with this title of Serving for the Wind, Deployments and Hosting for the rest of us. That sounds exciting, I guess. So in an effort to jazz it up, I'll try and pull the wool over your eyes and make it snazzy. I even kind of put this kind of tenuous, I don't know. But realistically, we're not talking about anything that's necessarily exotic or new. What I'm talking about in this talk is really fundamentals. We learn a lot at conferences, whether that's, that captions aren't optional in this great accessibility talk we heard earlier on, or all of the security vulnerabilities like the environment variable exfiltration, which that gave me the heebie-jeebies when I heard that. This is the best picture I could find of the heebie-jeebies. But yeah, that was terrifying. But we learn all of these amazing things, we get all of this inspiration, and then we go away and we try and put it into practice. And it's really a waste if we just confine all of these learnings to theory or to things we play around with. It's kind of a waste if we just confine these to our development environments, our local environments. It's really important that the stuff that we learn here and the stuff that we learn along the way reaches our users and gets out there. And in many ways, the way that we do that is by a slight kind of change in mindset and a change in process, and make sure that those things are up to snuff. So I mentioned process, and you're thinking, great, half an hour of slides about process. I'm not sure if that's really what I'm up for to finish today. So let me see if I can try and make it interesting and try and make it relevant for the end of the day. So in the next half hour or so, I want to talk a little bit about where it hurts in web development projects and development projects in general. I'll try and do that by telling kind of 3 stories that explain some things that have gone well or not so well for me and what I've learned, and then kind of wrap it up with the kind of mindsets and the resources that might be able to help. So that's the plan. So where does it hurt is the first part of that. So doing projects often includes things like clients, deadlines, often complexity. That shouldn't really be too much of a newsflash for anyone. But these things can combine to give us slightly sleepless nights at times. If we look at the perfect project timeline, let's break it down a little bit and kind of see how things go from inception to delivery. So we start our project typically with a brief, and then we end with awards. Are there any questions on that? And of course, realistically, there is no perfect project timeline, sadly. First of all, we've done no work here, which maybe that would be perfect, but we need at some point to start doing some work, and at some point, we're going to have to launch that work into existence. Before we can start the work, we have to have some kind of scoping exercise. Told you it was going to be jazzy this time, this talk. Scoping exercise to figure out what it is we're going to make for the client or for our customers. And then before we can launch it, of course, our customer's going to want to give some kind of final sign-off for that, which is probably going to come after some big, nerve-wracking, sweaty palms review of the work. So, with those things kind of set up, we can start doing the work and actually going through the process of making things and getting them into a state that we can progress the project. After we've been working for a little while, getting into a bit of a rhythm, this is usually where we rescope. I think we've all shared the same pain. We figure out, actually, we're making something that's not quite the right thing. Let's make the right thing now. And so that we get on again, and our cadence picks up, our pace picks up, it gets a little bit more frantic, trying to get to that big client review. So then we can review the work and we're fine, we can go and get the sign-off after we've done some more fixes after the review to again kind of shuffle it into place. Now you'll see these blobs are getting closer together now because the pace is picking up, it's frantic, it's a little bit disorganized. That's when things can start to go right. That's clearly in the wrong place, but sometimes the ball gets dropped a little bit. I don't know why there's a lemon there necessarily. It's the wrong thing, it's in the wrong place. But it happens at crunch time, things go awry. But we try and scramble, we get back on track, we do a last big push to get us to our final sign-off, which of course is not final sign-off after we get that, so then we've got to do a few more bits and pieces. And then we launch, and then we've got a few things to do, some fixes, and then we're done. So this is, this looks about right to me, but all of this kind of culminates in a launch day, which is nerve-wracking. So this is stolen directly from MailChimp, who just, this is the button you press when you do a mass mail out on MailChimp, which really summarizes perfectly the feeling of sending that big communication. But this is what it can feel like on launch day for a web development project. It can be nerve-wracking, and it shouldn't be that way, but it often is. Yes, projects can be hard. Projects usually involve some kind of learning, and they very often involve some kind of change. But thankfully, things have been changing for us a little bit that can make that a bit easier. Infrastructure, for one thing. We've had an evolving approach to infrastructure over the years. Again, if we draw another one of these timelines and think about where it once started, You know, when I started my career, I was pricing up racks and machines that would go into a secure room with cooling and fire retardants, all of that stuff, for on-site hardware that would serve a couple of websites. Amazing that that's where it once was. And of course that moved into getting some rack space in some kind of catered facility. And I'm not talking about rack space, I'm talking about physical space in a rack in some kind of catered environment where they would provide the network connectivity and the cooling and the power and all of that other infrastructure, and you would put devices in there. And then, you know, things started getting virtualized, and then we'd start getting virtual servers. In this case, you know, potentially something like Rackspace. Gets confusing here. But, you know, we're going from physical more and more virtual, and now, you know, we're seeing more of a move to things like software as a service, and even to the point that we're having functions as a service, where we're paying just for cycle time, just for, you know, for executing functions in someone else's infrastructure. So all of this change in infrastructure and the way that we deliver sites, you know, this has brought about, you know, the possibility of all of these different deployment and development conventions. So, you know, it's this approach that has really changed, and that can really, really help us. But, you know, nonetheless, it hurts when managing change on projects. It hurts when you're trying to manage the unknowable, because you never start off the project with a full view of, you know, everything you need to know. The time it usually hurts is at crunch time, as the pressure mounts, you know, at that right-hand end of that timeline with the inexplicable fruit. Sorry, saying that out loud, I'm just kind of looking over. Just wanted to see inexplicable fruit arrive on the screen. It's kind of, you know, this is where the plan often kind of goes in the trash. You know, at that crunch time in a project. So the question is, can we plan for the plan going in the trash? You know, can we offset that a little bit? So I want to get into my stories. So story number one was deploying on my first day. Now this is something that happened to me not when I was working at RGA, but at a previous agency. But nonetheless, it was my first day on the job. And I arrived, and we were doing a large-scale site deployment for a nationwide healthcare site. It was a big project. It was one that I wanted to get right, not least of all because it was my first day, but also, you know, it was big in the public eye. It was a site that matters. And so before I'd, you know, been shown where the coffee machine was, there was a little panic, and my brand new boss came to me and said, okay, this should have gone live on Friday, and this was Monday morning. So, you know, just that statement alone kind of makes me anxious a tiny bit about the deploying on a Friday thing, but we'll leave that aside just for a moment. The next thing that I was asked was, can you help the team figure out the deployment? And, you know, I was fresh-faced, I was new to the role, and I said, yeah, I'm sure, why not? Yeah, we can fix this. And so, you know, if we look back at our timeline here, and first of all, you'll notice that our fruit has changed because we never know what that thing's going to be. It's completely unknowable. But what we were doing, you know, at this point is, you know, we were trying to figure out the deployment just after the launch. Now, of course, it would be flippant of me to suggest that that's what was planned. What really was planned was moving it to there. Just seems reasonable, because that's the hard stuff. That's the stuff that you don't want to deal with very often. So, you know, we'll do it kind of just in time. So that was the timing of that, which is, you know, anxiety-inducing. But I want to talk about the deployment itself. So the deployment, you know, it's a standard thing. We had a production environment that we needed to get a website onto, and that was coming from a staging environment where the website currently was. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that the shape of the staging environment and the things on it is not quite the same as the things on the production environment. But that in itself is bad. You know, obviously we want those to be identical. They need to be perfect facsimiles of each other if the staging environment is going to do its job. But that's not the biggest problem. The reason that kind of happened is because the deployment process looked like this. It was 2 FTP windows and a mouse. A few people are fidgeting in their seats. And rightly so. And this was the moment that I could feel my buttocks clench a little bit in the office. My first day, I was nervous about this. And of course, this is troublesome. And you know what was happening was that, you know, the developer would drag a file from one window to the other, and then go to the browser and hit refresh and go, no. and then do it again, and it was, it was a bit anxiety-inducing. And then, after that wasn't working for a while, our developer, we'll call him Bob, that's not his name, but Bob then started dragging files from his development machine under his desk into the production environment, and the same kind of cycle happened, and then Alice joined in from her, so files were being dragged around all over the place. And at the crux of this, this isn't down to the fault of Bob or Alice or any one individual. It's the problem of FTP as being the mechanic for doing a deployment. This is tricky. Anyone willing to admit deploying things over FTP? Oh, there's a couple of brave souls. Well, the thing is, that's okay. It still happens from time to time. But the problem with that is, it often leaves us in an unknowable state. And it often leaves us in the point that we don't have a repeatable process. We don't know necessarily exactly what we've done each time, so we can't just repeat our process and be confident that we can deploy things perfectly every time. So in terms of how did it get on, did the site go live? Yes, it did. I'm very happy to say it did go live. Was it correct? Yes, it was. It probably was. Honestly, I don't think I can ever really know if it went live. The client signed it off, so that's fine. But of course, the big question really is, how did the next deployment go? Because we're seldom finished when we've done our first deployment. There are fixes, there are updates, there are changes. And since we didn't have a repeatable process that we were confident in, this is the big question. Not ready yet. Maybe if I come back next year, I'll be ready to talk about that. Do I need a hug? Yes, I do. It was tough. However, all is not lost because there are lessons to be learned along the way there, which is nice. The first thing is that version control, which was being used at this agency. It was just that it was being used as a way to manage things locally, and it was just like a file store. Version control really needs to extend all the way to deployments if it's going to be valuable. As soon as you let your guard down, the version control gets out of hand. The next lesson is that human intervention is really undesirable when it comes to deployments. We're not good at doing things exactly the same way every time, so get us out of the loop is always good. And the lesson here is that holistic deployments are far preferable to piecemeal deploys. This notion of changing one thing at a time and that changing the state of your environment, that's really something you want to avoid. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my second story. Which was searching for Syria. So this is a project I worked at when I was working at RGA. And if I can get this to play, can I? No. Okay, my videos don't seem to be particularly working up here, but that's okay. We'll. Oh, is that? Oh. It's a website. So this is a website that actually, in real life, rendered much better than this, I'm happy to say. But it was a website, this is going to make it really difficult if none of my videos work for some reason. Okay, never mind. So this is a website that involved lots and lots of change along the way, because the purpose of this site was to communicate the plight of Syrian refugees to the world and try and humanize that plight. Because very often, when things like that come along, it's the other side of the world. We don't think about it, and we don't realize that these are real people that this is happening to. And so this is what this site was all about. It was commissioned by Google, and it was in partnership with the UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So, as you might imagine, a site such as this, from start to finish, when we look at that perfect project timeline again, involves all kinds of change, and there's significant political sensitivity for this, not just in terms of the content, but also, how do the different companies, how are they perceived when making this site? Are Google going to be seen as trying to push their products by making a site that conveys this message? How do you deal with it? It's very, very sensitive. So, there are lots of different stakeholders on a project like this, and they're all quite sensitive. And this was a project that had a huge global launch. It was going into lots of different markets, lots of languages. It was another big one. So, it's again another one that I wanted to get right. And more than that, this was going to have a huge launch. And every now and again, this isn't a good example of it because the link at the bottom is for something different. But every now and again, Google will do like a homepage kind of promo for your site. Doesn't happen very often, it's usually a big thing. That usually, well, how should I put this? It creates a slight spike in traffic when that happens. So it was a big one, definitely one I wanted to get right. And so, when we go back again to our timeline, I didn't want to be in this situation again, right? I wanted to do this a little bit differently. So the first thing we did, of course, is we moved our figuring out deployment right back to as close to the start as we possibly could. With that done early, we could feel pretty confident that even though it would get crunchy towards the end of the project, projects usually do, we'd at least be able to get rid of some of these outliers. Benedict said right at the beginning of the day, automate as early and as fast as you can when he was talking about WebAssembly, and that's exactly what, I would always echo that, and that was the whole point of this. The environment that we were working on was Google Cloud Compute. Now this worked beautifully for us, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I want to just mention what we were delivering, because we had to deliver, of course, a website at the end of this, but along the way, we had to deliver to the QA team. They needed to see what was happening. The production team needed to be able to see how things were progressing. At some stage, we'd need to deliver versions of the site to the translations teams who were going to be going and translating all of the content into different languages. Of course, we had to deliver to the client so they could see what was happening and how it was progressing. And the client's bosses, you better believe they wanted to see that as well. And eventually, we needed to launch this and deliver this to the general public. So there are lots of times throughout this project that we need to deliver this. So we had this ambition of wanting to be able to deliver any version of the site at any time. So we'd always want to be able to see a snapshot of the site. And we did that, of course, through our friend version control. So we decided that we'd have a strategy where whenever we tagged the code, whenever we tagged the site in Git, that would automatically create a version of the site, which is a resource that we could see at a URL. Now, I'm a big fan of URLs. I'm a bit of a URL nerd. I think I'm amongst friends, I can say that. I have a habit of when I get to speak at conferences, I like to tell everyone that URLs all include this thing at the beginning, HTTP double meh. This is not my joke. This is Alex Sexton's joke, but once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And if you're wondering where that is, there he is. There he is. There's the double meh. Now, once again, that's Alex Sexton's fault that you're all damaged by that, but that's just, it heals me to share. But all of the tags would create a URL. They would create a resource that we could see at a URL. And that's, let me show you a little bit about how that worked. So, again, we've got our development environment, and we have a site that we need to get out to the world. And eventually, that's going to need to go to a production environment, and this is the route we would take to get there. So, all of our changes were pushed into Git, and we had a continuous integration server, in this case it was Jenkins, monitoring Git, and whenever it would see a new tag created on Git, some cogs would turn, it would build out a version of the site, and it would push that to a staging environment, so we'd have it there, and we could share the URLs with the team so that they could see that. And eventually, a determination was made, okay, that's live, we're ready to go with that live, and it gets pushed to production. So that's kind of a flow that works with version control at its heart, which made me feel a little bit more comfortable than dragging things around through FTP. And the way this looks, sadly this isn't a screenshot of the actual dashboard we have, because I took this after I'd left the project, and indeed the company. But this is very, very representative of that. So this is in App Engine, and on this project what you can see is each of these instances of the site, you can see the version is, I think that looks like a timestamp to me, and all of the traffic in this instance is being sent to the latest version, but the other versions live on, so at any stage you could decide to route the traffic either in its entirety to a different version, or you can shake the traffic between them. And this is great, because it means that at any stage you can step back or forward through the versions and put different things live in just a moment, just by toggling which is the live one. And so realistically, this isn't this scenario, this is closer to this, where we don't have a separate staging site, a staging server and a production server. We have one live production environment, and within it we've got these different versions of the site that we could choose, which one is live at any particular time. We can move backwards and forwards and what have you. So this is really nice because it meant that all of our demonstrations, all of our discussions, all of the tests, the issues that were created, and the sign-off, that was all happening against known versions of the site. Every version had a URL, and we could say to someone, oh yeah, this isn't working on version 0.0.9, and they could see that, they could look at the URL of that and always see that. So known versioning for previews was just huge. So the lessons from that, addressable and accessible build versions are just a huge win. They just relax everyone, and you just feel like you've got great visibility of what you're working on. Deciding when and what to tag requires some coordination. I wouldn't necessarily do it quite that way again, because we had to decide, okay, this is a version that's good to go, ship it with a tag. So maybe I would change that a little bit. And then immutable deploys to the production environment remove this uncertainty from launch day. So this kind of sweaty gorilla hand that we had at the beginning, that's gone now, because all of the versions of your site are already being served from your production environment. All you're doing is just saying, okay, now this one is ready to go, and share it with the world. So that was the last thing there. Okay, I'm moving swiftly on. Now this could get interesting, because I've got videos in here to communicate my point, and my videos aren't working, so prepare for some hand waving. So the last one is Netlify, building Netlify. So I joined the company in December of last year. So I got to see a lot of the work in building Netlify.com on top of Netlify's platform. So recently got a bit of a refresh. This is what it looked like. And I think I've described that as, Netlify.com is a Jamstack site hosted on Netlify using Netlify to Netlify. Now, similar to Jonathan's type dev tools, inspecting dev tools to see how dev tools work, this is a little bit kind of Inception-like, trying to figure out how this works. But that's okay. Let me break it down a tiny bit. So, this is the scenario we had a moment ago, looking at the Google project I was talking about, the Searching for Syria project. Slightly differently to Jenkins running the continuous integration, and then Google Cloud Compute housing the builds. The way that Netlify works is that Netlify runs that continuous integration for you and deploys it to its CDN, all kind of in one thing. So this is kind of nice, because it means that we have that Git-based workflow that I was craving at the beginning of the talk, all the way to production. Everything is based on Git activity, which is really nice. Now, I also did something sneaky a minute ago. I kind of dropped in this word Jamstack, and there's plenty of people who went, well, I don't know about this, which is reasonable. So let me describe what that is. So Jamstack is a term that's kind of emerging, describing sites that are built with JavaScript, with APIs, with markup, to create something that's a static asset that you can put onto a CDN. That's kind of what that describes. And I'm just going to unpack that just a tiny bit, just to make the rest of this make a bit more sense. So lots of us these days, when we're building things for the front end, we've got some kind of build automation that we use in our local development environments, whether that's something like Gulp or Grunt or Webpack or whatever other build tools maybe you might be using. In this scenario, we'll be taking markup, so HTML and other kind of front-end assets, maybe using JavaScript as part of the build process itself, or we might be baking JavaScript in as well, and it's outputting this static thing, this site, this deployable entity that we can put onto a CDN and have that be served. Now, the APIs part of that is that our build process could be calling in content from things like headless CMSs or other data sources or pricing engines or all kinds of things. But the point is that we have APIs that we can use to enrich the site as we're building it to generate it. Now, also, JavaScript could be used in the client as well. Once we ship this thing, there might be JavaScript, which is, again, another static asset, which is talking to APIs directly. So there's lots of flexibility and lots of ways that this could work. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm using this term, Jamstack. Now, in the case of Netlify, if you go and use the Netlify admin tool, so the app that you configure your site from, or if you look at the kind of shop front site, that's the stuff that's in white. That's a static site that's been built with Hugo or it's a React app for the admin part of it. And then that talks to the APIs in the background, which then talks to all of the rest of the infrastructure, kind of, the Netlify product and platform, if you like. But the thing we're interested in here is just the website, because that's what's being built. And I mentioned that builds are based on Git commits, so we have a history of every state of the site. Now I'm nervously pressing this button because I don't think this video is going to play, so I'm going to have to describe it. What could go wrong? So this is the dashboard of the Netlify, my Netlify account, and each one of these things is a site. Now, were I able to show you, I could go into any one of those sites and we'd see a deploy log, which is every row is an instance of a deploy, and each deploy is linked to a Git commit. Now this is huge because it means that every time we do Git push, and that will kick off another deployment, just the same as when we were describing, as I was describing in our continuous integration with Google. And then it will create an instance of the site that's there and it's visible for us to decide whether that gets promoted automatically to production or if we want to be able to roll back and forward between them. The other thing that's kind of key there is that right there in the deploy, logs showing each instance, is there's a link to the Git commit that actually created that deployment in the first place. So right there in our kind of history, you can say, okay, show me the site at this state. It's on its own unique URL. And also, show me the commits that brought that about, which is huge for troubleshooting and rolling back and forward. That's what that video would have shown. This might get more difficult, who knows? See how we get on. So the other thing that's kind of interesting here is that since the site that we're looking at for Netlify is the stuff in white on the front, the stuff that's been baked out statically, it's decoupled from the APIs and the product at the back. It meant that during my first week there, I got to go to some meetings where they say, oh, let's have a retrospective, let's look at how things used to be. And this is the site back 18 months, maybe 2 years ago. This is what it looked like, and it's showing kind of the list of sites, which is like the view we saw a second ago, and then drilling into a site view itself. And then, a few months later, it looked a bit more like this. Again, similar kind of structures, but looking a bit differently. And then more recently, it looks like this. Now, these weren't just screen grabs that were taken. What happened was that, a member of the team just said, okay, well, I'll run the site now as it was in, 2016. And it's just called that up on a URL, and that URL had a static site that was talking to the same APIs. So all of that content, actually, this one, from a year or so ago, one of those is a project we did for Smashing Mag, which we did in the future from there. So it's kind of a little bit crazy that the same UI can be just talking to different UIs can be talking to the same APIs in the background. It's kind of cool. So that's kind of because of this kind of separation in this model. The other thing, now then, this is going to also be difficult to explain, is that automation was based on the Git activity as well. So there's lots of different actions that we take when we're managing a site with Git. We're used to doing things like pull requests and branching and those kind of things. So what we have in this environment is that we can generate preview builds from pull requests. Now that's a bit of a mind bender. And so I'll do my best to talk through this non-playing video again. I'm just going to desperately hammer this button. No, okay. That's fine. So in the same way that pushing code to Git will trigger a build, and it will pull out the repository, run your build for you, and deploy it to the CDN. If someone creates a pull request, what we would see here is that just creating that pull request that's not being merged, but it's just a pull request being created, we also spot that, and we will spin up another instance, another kind of a build bot, and we will merge over there that code, create a preview build of that, and deploy that for you as well. Now, that's kind of hard to get your head around, but what that is actually doing is it's creating you a view of your site as it will look if you decide to merge that pull request. So it's giving you a chance to see the future before it happens. This is incredibly powerful and really, quite liberating. It gives us confidence in the future state of our site before we take any action on it. Now, that kind of brings me to another video that I have to describe. Whew, how's everyone doing? I really wish we had captioning on this. So since we've got this ability to build everything on top of the Git model, so we've got pull requests creating builds, we've got commits creating build, branches also get their own builds, and that enables a whole nother set of possibilities. And this is not something that's necessarily unique to Netlify, being able to build things based on branches or pull requests or what have you. I'm just using this to illustrate it because that's what I'm most familiar with. But something that I think is a little bit different for Netlify is this ability to do A/B testing based on branch builds. So if I'm creating a new feature branch because I want to be able to say, I'm going to test out a slightly bigger, flashier purchase button, I'll create that in a feature branch. Automatically, I'll get a URL built out for me that has that I could send people to. We could test against it and what have you. But what we can do with A/B testing, which sadly I can't illustrate because I haven't got a playing video, is that we'll be able to serve both of those things up to users at the same time. So both of these things are out on a CDN, and then we can start shaping traffic at the CDN to one version of the site or the other, still under the same URL. Now this is kind of exciting because it means that you're really getting to do proper testing of how the site performs under the different UI conditions without having to do anything like DOM manipulation with JavaScript to change the state of that, which often you'll see in A/B testing. Whew, okay, let's move along to the lessons. Top lesson, test your videos before you go on stage. Second lesson, embracing version control conventions removes the need to reinvent them. Now, what I mean by that is all of the processes that you can use through these kind of continuous integration tools, Netlify being one, and of course there are others, when you embrace those conventions and build with those and have things triggered from those, it means that you're not having to reinvent ways to do versioning, to create different instances of things to preview. So you're just building on top of the conventions you already have. Reduced friction brings agility and confidence. So in other words, when deploying a new version of the site is mundane, when it's as simple as just doing a git push and you don't have to think about it, and if the ability to roll back and forward between versions of the site is trivial, it's just hugely liberating because it means that you don't have the nervous finger of deploy destiny. You can always roll things back and you can always try things out with confidence. And the last lesson is that Jamstack sites, or this kind of static hosting infrastructure with the automation and the ecosystem around it, can go way beyond an experience which is just static. People often ask me for an example of that, and the whole admin interface of Netlify itself, it moves a lot more than I've shown here. That is a React app that is kind of served statically, so you can do all kinds of things with that. Okay, I'm running out of time. Maybe it's a good thing that those videos didn't play. Mindsets and resources I want to just talk about. So I've mentioned some of the resources already, but Circle CI is another continuous integration service that you can use. It's a software as a service model. Jenkins is also something that you can install and configure to run some of this automation for you. I would also say that I mentioned Jamstack kind of very briefly, but you can learn more about that there and what that means and get to resources. Also, the newdynamic.org is a great site for lots of these processes and lots of these kind of architectures that is quite useful to take a look at. Similarly, things like headless CMSs and static site generators are all kind of part of this ecosystem that can really help with some of this tooling. And there are some sites that kind of compile a bunch of those. And the other kind of aspect to this, which I haven't really touched on, is serverless. I'm very, very cautious about saying serverless because then someone will shout out, "There's always a server." And yeah, likewise with wireless, someone pointed out that somewhere there's a wire. But that's another kind of the other part to this equation is like the ecosystem of the tools and the services that you can get to bring this stuff to life. It's really starting to mature now. So Chris Coyer put this site together, which is really nice, thepowerofserverless.info. There's all kinds of resources there. I would encourage you to take a peep at that. Well, I'm rapidly running out of time, but that's okay, we're almost there. Mindsets. It'll be little surprise to you that I say just version control for everything from the first piece of code that you write right the way through to production is key. As long as it reaches all the way to production, you're in better shape. I'd also say that it's wise to expose the red lights as early as possible. Now, what on earth do I mean by that? Well, as we progress through a project, everything's fine until we get to, we need to do the deployment to production. What does that look like? If we leave those challenges until later in the project, they become big challenges, and they all happen at that awkward crunch time, and some of these things then become a real problem, and it's really difficult to solve. Whereas if you do that much earlier in the project, where you kind of tackle the things that are going to be a challenge later on, you can chip these things away one at a time. So even then, at the end of the project, where something, some other curveball comes up, it's not happening at the same time as everything else, so it's not insurmountable. Another little note on deployments, I like to kind of think of real value in making your deployment scripted, making it automated so it's triggered by the events that you normally carry out through your processes. Making it real, that's key. There's no point doing deployments to a server that is not like the one that ultimately is going to be serving your site. You want to target your real environment if at all possible, and make it first. Make it right back at the very beginning of the project. We can always expect that projects are going to have times of chaos. There's no reason for us to let our kind of poor processes be what creates that chaos. It'll come in anyway. A little note on expertise, it's an awfully full stack these days. We've got a lot to contend with the front-end development that we've got, the kind of sites that we're trying to bring out to the world, the kind of experiences that we want, the infrastructure that's behind it. There's a lot to take on. It's great to use the skills of others, to use the expertise of people who take on one particular challenge, whether that's database infrastructure or hosting infrastructure or whatever else. I've taken real kind of inspiration from the day, and I think most of us will be in the same place. Whether that's kind of seeing like these huge kind of boundless possibilities with CSS that are coming, or thinking about really creative ways that we can collaborate and communicate. It's a really, really exciting time. So it's kind of nice to try and to lean on expertise of others where we possibly can. I would just kind of leave you with the call to arms, really, to say, let's go and make kind of beautiful things, whether that means that they're visually beautiful or that they just do a really good job. It's a fun time, I think, to be working in the field that we are. I'm 2 minutes over. I apologize, but I'm done. Thank you ever so much. The slides for this talk will be available now, hawksworth.com, which is my site, /talk/render. That's all from me. Thanks ever so much for listening. Thanks a lot.